I am unashamed. What about you?
So, it's a magnanimous day, Jace.
Isn't every day?
It's magnanimous.
Because I'm back?
Well, yes, that's, of course. You're back.
No, that means that was not the...
No,
what was that word you used?
Magnanimous.
Magnanimous. I've never used that word.
Dad, you know that word, don't you?
I've never used it. I heard other people.
Well, I thought you were an English major. Let's break down that word.
They might have missed magnanimous.
You've got to expand the vocabulary. It's magnanimous or huge because Jace is back, and I want you to tell the audience about where you've been and what you've been doing. But it is episode number 500.
Oh,
500?
500 episodes
it's
today.
Wasn't there a movie about that?
500. Oh, it's 500 days.
No, it was 300. No, it was 300. That was the...
There was something
Roman
500 days, but that was like a romantic comedy. But anyway, yes, the 500th episode of the Unashamed podcast. So, and I have to just say, so we're not going to take any credit for that because we're just doing what we've been called to do. But I want to thank you, the Unashamed Nation, because if you didn't listen, if you don't tell people about it, we wouldn't be doing this anymore. So really, it's because you guys keep recruiting people and more people keep downloading. The show is still growing.
You know what this means?
What does it mean?
It means it's half of 1,000.
I know numbers are big to you, Jace. I know you.
Look, I will quote Carl Allison, who's a witness in the heavenly lands.
Yep, he's crossed over.
If numbers were not important, God would not have written a book called Numbers. So that
Which
is
was
true.
a classic line from Carl.
It shut me down and was a mic drop moment in my life. I'm like, why are you obsessed with how many people and have the numbers?
Boy, he was an attendance hawk, wasn't he?
It was a good point, though. I thought, okay.
Yeah.
So, all right,
That was pretty sharp.
Well, congratulations. Well, I'm back. I mean, I
told the audience we sent you away to find some stories to come back and regale us with. So that's
I have a peculiar story.
Okay, good. That's why we sent you away.
I told Jace when he showed back up this morning, a lot of people leave. They send me a lot of books, a whole lot. So some of them I read, some of them I don't. Some of them I just pick through them a little bit looking at it. But I read Jace's book.
Oh, yeah, that was the bombshell of the morning, what Phil's fixed to say, because my mouth went open.
I said, I wonder what Jace had to say. Good call. I thought, good call. So
I know.
But it kind of, he's got him a sequence of events from I would say coming from his mother's womb.
Yep.
Your mother and my woman.
That's right.
So he worked that in.
Yep.
So for the listeners who are trying to keep up,
Did I show up at his birth? No. Jace gives it the reason.
Phil, in the past week, sat down and read my book 7 years after I wrote it.
That is correct.
So did it happen to just be laying by your chair?
I saw it there among others. Most of them.
Had it been there 7 years?
I don't know if it's been 7 years.
But I would say I thought it was a great book.
It is a great book, which I read it when it came out a few years ago, but it is a great book.
I'm going to go back and read it.
Very well done because it's not from like some kind of religious.
No, it's unique to Jace.
It was all there.
Yeah.
It was all there.
Okay, now I got to give you.
You're an undefiled religion. What says that is.
Well, my favorite thing
we
had just
help widows and orphans. I mean, he kept.
We
it
had
simple.
just started really churning out the books when Jace's came out. I don't know exactly sure where it is in the line of books. I know Willie's was first, Dad's was second, and Si's was third. But we're selling a lot of books. This is back in the day. Show's rolling, and I remember. The publishing process was just like, I mean, it was drinking out of a fire hose, because they were trying to get these books out in 6 months, which is unheard of in the pub, but they're trying to, take advantage of the show. And so, and all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, the Robertsons, they're so easy to work with. Wah, wah, wah.
Well, here, I'll give you the backstory. I think
Jace.
the statute of limitations have run out, if there are any, on this book. But so what they do is they give you these at the time, because our notoriety had exploded because of the show. And so they came to me about a book, and I was like, oh, yeah. And so we had a negotiation process that went really well for me. But part of what they got out of the negotiation process is you had to have a ghostwriter. Because, I mean, who am I? I'm no writer. And I consented that. I was like,
Yeah.
I've never written a book.
Most of our books have ghostwriters.
But to your point, I am really stubborn. And I thought if I put my name on it. So, anyway, so this guy who is an ESPN sports writer, I think he's their senior writer, Mark Slabaugh.
Yeah, Slabaugh.
He did one of mine.
Well, they chose
Actually
him.
did 2 years.
So, well, here's the funny part. So, what they do in normal book processes, I guess, is they interview you. And they're like, "What do you want to do the book on? Here's my thought." And I was like, "Well, I just want to kind of tell how I got to this point of writing the book. I just want to tell the story."
Yeah, tell your story.
And so, I think he said that, and I said, "No, I want to tell God's story in my life. I mean, I want it to be about Him." So he said, "Okay, well, I'll interview you." So he did. So he wrote the first chapter, sent it to me. I got about halfway through the second paragraph, called him up, and I said, "This is not." I actually called the publishing company, and I was like, "We need a new." There was no reflection. It was not like it was bad.
Because he's a great
written.
writer, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, "This has nothing to do with what I want to do." And they said, "Well, call him and tell him." So they already figured I was a problem, you know. So we tried different things, and finally I came up, and nothing worked. I said, "Look, let me just write it, and then I'll give it to you."
And you
We did it the exact opposite.
And he
I
paused.
said, "I'll write the
You
chapter."
clean it up. You clean it
I
up.
said, "And you clean it up."
Yep.
Well, here's what's funny. I wrote the first chapter, sent it. He sent it back. There was about 4 little grammar. I'm like, "I thought you were going to clean it up." He's like, "I loved it."
So Mark got the deal of the year. You're writing your own book, and he's
so
getting
at the
paid for it.
end, I said, "This was the greatest ghostwriting in your career." Now, there were a few, he moved some chapters around at the end, and he helped in that, but for the most part, I wrote it, and a few things he said, I wouldn't tell that story, you know, it has nothing to do with anything. And so there was a few moments like that, but we actually worked good together, and
He's a good dude.
He is. And look, his books, I'm not sure if he helped Will and them on their first one either, but I know Dad's, Size, and yours, Jace, were all, you know, some of the best-selling books of all the books. And so he was right there with a part
And
of
he
it.
made,
did
him, he made
good,
him some good bucks there, you know.
Well, and
He sent me a note not too long ago because he saw Dad was cranking up some books again, and he was like, "Hey, if you ever need me."
Nah, he was good, and he was what I needed once we figured out our roles.
Right.
Because, like, if I ever wrote another book, I would probably go through the normal process.
Right.
But on this, I'm like, well, this is
your
my story. You're not going to know and I want Bible verses in the book. I mean, because at first,
But it didn't come across as dry theology as some of them do.
No, I loved it. I thought Jace's book was excellent, and me knowing him obviously his whole life, like it
Down to
really
earth,
spoke
common
to his
sense.
to the way
I had
Jace
a
looks
couple of people, because I can't remember.
and he did acknowledge in the book that I'm the reason he got through preaching school. So I was like, all right, he gave me.
Wow, that's
Yep.
just
yeah,
unadulterated.
he had that in there.
So I'm glad you shared that. I mean, I appreciate it. And so
Jace would say attending preaching school was a bummer.
it was a real
it went past a grind. It was
a low point of just I really had to search deep down.
Jace was
What was your line,
Jace was
Jace?
a fish out of water.
His line at one time was, "You have to be able to have the capability of looking at the instructor with your eyes open, but you're actually sound asleep." He said, "You have to learn how to sleep with your eyes open."
It's a skill that I developed in that time, and it was only certain instructors. Most of them
That's quite a skill,
good.
Jace.
So where I was at, we were going to go away for the weekend. You know, we're all busy, but just with doing the show and the podcast and my last events and scheduled event, it just I needed a break. And, you know, we have a new baby and different things, and Missy needed a break.
Yeah, she did.
So this situation come up. Some of our best friends, probably my closest friend outside of physical family, he was he was turning 50, and so his wife and my wife are good friends. So we planned this elaborate surprise. I usually don't like surprises, but I thought this was a good one. The surprise was she would tell him that she has a trip. Our friends the wife would tell her husband that she wants to take him on a trip for his 50th birthday, not tell him where it is, but like give him the overall temperature so he knows what to pack.
Yeah.
And then we were going to meet him in Dallas at the Dallas airport because we were on the same flight. So when he comes in,
then you're there.
I'm sitting there and I'm first class. I mean, because we wanted to be as soon as he walked in, we're sitting there and so we film it. So the problem started when we go to the airport to go from Monroe to Dallas. Beautiful day, perfect weather. I actually checked the radar. I parked the vehicle. We were running a little late, so I'm hustling to get in. And as soon as I walked in, Missy's standing at the counter, and she said, "Flight's canceled."
Oh.
And I said, "Why?" She said, "They gave me no reason." So funny.
So Missy's happy is what you're saying.
She was not happy, but she didn't, So she's like, I said, "Well, what do you recommend?" And she said, "Well, they said the connecting flight is at 10:20. So
this like 6
we
in
were
the
like
morning.
doing the math, and I was like, I don't think we got enough time to get to Dallas.
Drive there, right?
Yeah. But I said, you know what? Let's head there anyway, and maybe we can get a later flight. It ruined the surprise part in our mind. So we take off to Dallas really on faith because we didn't have a official plan.
Yeah.
So she's looking up flights, and so not only did they cancel the flight, they told her the wrong time. It was 11:20.
Ooh,
So then I was
hour.
like, when she found that, we were in like Ruston. So we had been gone 30 minutes. And so I'm like, my foot went down on the gas pedal just a hair. And I thought, I actually think we can make it. But the closer we got to Dallas, the traffic was starting to pick up. And it was looking like there was no way. Because by the time we parked, we only just had a few minutes to get through the airport. But look, since we were in first class, we didn't have to stand in line. Went to the front of the line, bam, bam. So almost, unbelievably, we make it 5 minutes for boarding. So then we text our friends. Of course, they didn't even know all this was happening per se. And so they said, well, y'all go ahead and get on the plane because they weren't at the gate. So we're in our seats. Here comes my buddy. I got up like, surprise, and he was like, "Hey, how you doing? Good to see you." I mean, big shot, nothing. No, what are you doing here? I mean, it was just, I saw the phones go down, and they're like,
who wants to record that? The most underwhelming surprise ever.
It was. So later on, we figured out that, there's a lot of people around. He's like, I'm not going to act like an idiot.
So he was he didn't want to.
He just couldn't, he's a man's man. He's just like, no, I'm not going to be like, wow, what are you doing? Because his opinion was other people do that are fans of the show. And like, I'm never doing that. He just thinking I didn't want to draw attention to the situation. So that was kind of funny. So anyway, we go to Pebble Beach, and I've been there once. And
I couldn't remember if you'd been there once or twice. I knew you'd
been there
played.
once. And look, the fact that I came back shows you how spectacular. Because I'm not a very good golfer, but if you want to play golf in any capacity, the holy grail of that would be to play at Pebble Beach.
Yeah, Pebble Beach.
So that was what we were doing
Augusta,
for his 50th birthday.
Right.
Is
was a golf trip.
Yeah, it's a golf trip. We played at Spyglass. And
hang on, let's take a break. So we got some crazy financial times with this inflation that's been going on, and sometimes you want to go out and make an investment, or maybe you have to, maybe you're a first-time house owners, or you're ready to buy your home, or a big purchase like a car. And one of our sponsors, ScoreMaster, has what they call the 3-week rule. If you'll just give them 3 weeks to help you, you're going to save a lot of money, especially on interest rates, which right now is on everybody's mind, to be able to save money in the long term. So before you apply for a mortgage, buy a car, or even apply for a credit card or finance anything, go to ScoreMaster.com/Phil. They're going to, on average, you're going to set your credit score is going to go up 61 points in just 3 weeks. And the higher your credit score is, the lower your interest rate. So that's how it saves you money. Zach and I both have used ScoreMaster. It did save us money when we were financing a home. So once you check these guys out, they have a privacy feature that lets you swipe away the bad guys who sell your personal information. So it's a secure place. ScoreMaster.com/Phil. That's ScoreMaster.com/Phil. On average, 61 points in just 3 weeks. ScoreMaster.com/Phil.
So here's the funny story. And a lot of
This
people
comes
say,
under the heading of when you've run out of something to do. Al,
I knew that was
Phil,
coming.
you're not a celebration-oriented person.
this is nightmarish.
No, here's what you got to remember. If you're
You can't make the trip. Let's just drive. We'll make it by 5 minutes. I mean, no.
we did.
It's too much.
the static actually started on the way back because now my truck is in Dallas.
Oh,
So
but
when
your
we
flight
got
is
to the
home.
airport coming back, before I tell you a couple stories about the trip, Missy goes up to the counter and says, "Okay, we want to cancel that last leg from Dallas to Monroe on the way back." And he said, "No." She said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Just don't get on the plane." Of course, we figured out later that if you cancel it, they have to give our money back. It's
Right.
over. And so I said, "Well, sir, your company caused an event, a series of unfortunate events that now my vehicle is in Dallas. I got to get that. So we're just going to get in that truck and drive the last leg because
Right.
you canceled for no reason
Right.
that you were willing to give, and it wasn't weather."
Yeah.
And he said, "Can't do it." So I just stopped right there. I mean, we finally, here's what's funny about this. So when we get to Dallas, we go get our vehicle. Well, we get a text from this airline company saying, "If you'd like to give up your seats, we'll give you $350
Credit.
a voucher because we're overbooked." I'm like, we tried to cancel earlier. Now you're wanting
That's
to pay
how
us.
stupid it is. I mean, it just makes no sense.
So I said, "Missy, call and get that." I said,
Yeah.
"Tell them right now we want it."
Wait, see,
And-
I'm just
but look-
listening to your series.
But Phil,
sequence
here's
of
what's
events.
funny.
That's why I don't run in that world ever.
Here's what's funny. If you get the voucher, we have to take your bags off the plane. And we can't get them because we've already left.
Right.
So I'm like, now they're holding our bags as
Hostage.
a ransom.
For that money.
Yep.
So anyway, we drove back. Then I had to go to the airport and get her bags, and we got no voucher. So what I was going to tell you, though, is
Well, they get you at every turn. You
Phil,
can't do-
California is the perfect place if you want to get away into just obscurity. Because you think about it, people, they don't know who I am out there and don't care. And the people who do, they don't want to be seen with me.
Because that takes them out of their secrecy that they're
Well, because they're like, "Oh, is he with one of those?"
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
So if you want to just disappear, go to California. And so that's what I did. It was kind of nice.
The last time you're going to see me, California might disappear, but not me.
So here's what I think was funny, Phil. So we go out. I mean, you have all these critters out there, and by weird contrast, from a spiritual perspective, because this story's getting long, nobody wants to see the slides of the story. But Pebble Beach Spectacular, you got all these animals, and look, there's mallard ducks. A lot. We saw a lot of mallards. I mean, I didn't know they were saltwater friendly because it's right
Camping
there.
out there in Texas, you wouldn't.
Ken had a nest
California.
Yeah.
on number 18, which is the most
Yeah.
Just
Iconic, beautiful.
incredible looking.
But Jace, when we toured California back in the day, and we made how the West was won, all the duck hunting we did, we went from one end of California to the other. They were the most hospitable. This was when?
No, Phil,
What
look.
time frame was this?
80s,
80s, 90s?
No, look, and I
90s.
was making a joke, but I mean, when you experience, look, the people were super nice. The food was great. Now, look, you bring your wallet.
Yeah, it
I'm
ain't
proud of it. But, but it was, I mean, it's very expensive, but I think everything in California is.
Yeah, well, everything's taxed to death. It's,
And look, you know what they got everywhere now? Goats. Because they're trying to prevent forest fires. So they have all this underbrush, and then it dries out. Well, now they just There's
turn the goats loose.
hundreds of goats everywhere. So I felt quite at
Eating the
home.
browse, eating the
Eating
stuff.
the browse. And then there's all these other animals. I was like, well, you are catching on.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with that. They need somebody like me to kind of control this. Because I'm going to tell you what happened to me. So I'm on like hole number 4 at Spyglass, and they have the little cart with the the drinks and the food. And so Barrett gets a breakfast sandwich. I think it costs $18.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I'm like, phew, I'm not that hungry. So I get a bag of $7 nuts, cashew nuts. I'm like, I'm good with that. I mean, for $7. So I put the bag in the little cubby hole in the cart. And, I tee off. I leave the bag there. We get to the green. Well, I hear something. It's like 2 crows fighting. I look up, and there's a crow that has my nuts on his beak in my cart. And it was unopened. And he starts flying off. And I don't know, just adrenaline hit me, I guess. I just took off running after. Wide open. So
After a crow
After a
who's
crow.
Well, a
moved in
man-
on your nuts.
in short bursts, a man can move pretty fast, So, because he wasn't used to that behavior. So he dropped the nut. Well, when it hit the ground, he had already poked a hole in them. Of course, they went everywhere. I picked up about 10 of them in the bag and said,
That's
well, I got 10.
that was about $1 a cashew once you got.
I just couldn't believe it. I was like, what is wrong with this situation? You need a warden, not to enforce laws, but to make sure, look, you got to keep, animals need to know there's a line you cross, and that was crossed.
Oh yeah.
So the next day,
You're the only person in the history of Pebble Beach that would have run after that bird. I can tell you that right
well,
now.
it's funny. We got back to the cart, and his breakfast sandwich, he had laid it open.
Oh no.
And taken a bite. No, that crow had stomped on that to get to those nuts, and I said I wouldn't eat the rest of that.
No.
I said
Not
if
at all.
a crow
Oh,
will pass on a half-eaten sandwich
To get that
get
bag
those
of nuts.
nuts, I said you need to chunk. Yeah, I don't care how much it costs.
Plus, who cares what that? I mean, who knows what that crow's been walking around? We know what crows eat.
So the second day, I buy a bag of jalapeno kettle chips. I opened the bag, got a couple, put it in the same deal, but I wasn't going to keep it out of my sight. I was just going to, like, if I went to the green, I was going to
Take
put
it
it in
with
my
you.
pocket.
Yeah.
I reached back to get my driver. In that 4-second span, a crow dive bombed the cart, grabbed the bag, and here we go again. But this one, he had been through this rodeo before.
It may have been the same one.
Saw a fence. He crossed the fence. Look, landed on it, and then proceeded to eat every one of those chips
In
while
front of-
looking at me. He'd eat one and look up at me. Eat one. I'm just standing there on the other side of the fence.
the moral of that story is everything's gone south in California.
That's right. The animals have taken over.
Oh, yeah.
You would appreciate that story.
That's
Phil.
pretty good.
But it was a great time. We were only supposed to be gone for the weekend, but like I said, we had some travel issues.
Delays.
And we wanted to get back for what happened last night, and you can introduce that.
Yeah, so I was going to say I'm glad we sent you away because you always have unique stories. And then in your absence, Zach was in town because we've been doing interview bites for behind the scenes on the new movie, The Blind, which we talked about quite a bit when Zach was on the podcast. And we're super excited about it. And so last night, we mentioned this on last podcast, that we were getting together last night as a family, and we were going to spend some time in prayer about the movie, because we want the Almighty to bless it. We've said all along that we want it to be something where people have an opportunity to see the life change of mom and dad, which led to our family and everything else. And we're celebrating the launch of Duck Family Treasure, which now I see is all over Fox. I'm seeing an ad about every show I watch.
Yeah, are you?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
They're doing the extended trailers now, so it's like a minute and 2 minutes.
Well, I think so. The official release of that is on the 19th, Father's Day.
Day.
They gave a sneak peek to already subscribers,
Right.
I guess, to something. So
No, and I've gotten several emails from people in the Unashamed Nation, and Jace, they love it. I mean, like they're like
Well, that's good. Y'all let me know this because
I forwarded a couple of them on to you, but I've heard from several, and they've watched already.
I feel like the whole series is a journey. I mean, so I think the first episode kind of explains what we're doing because most people, they're like, "You're doing what?" It's like in the teaser I noticed they put Willie's response.
Yeah,
because Willie, he's my brother, and we're filming a show. And he wasn't real sure what we were doing.
right.
I mean, like so when I explained it in the episode,
He just starts cackling.
he couldn't stop laughing. That wasn't faked or coerced. He literally could not stop
And
laughing.
that was very funny last night. So we watched last night, let's take another break. Last night we all got together. What it reminded me of, Jace, was of course, we were kind of looking at the movie, and because we saw a couple of clips, and it's very raw right now, the footage, but we saw a couple of clips from the movie, which looks amazing early.
Yeah.
And then then we showed the trailer from Jeff's new show, and Si was there too. But it reminded me of the first time we got together as a family.
Exactly.
Once we had made the decision that we were going to go forward with the Little Duck Show. And we just spent time in prayer and just, talking about it.
And we were trying to keep everybody, we were starting a spiritual foundation that we weren't going to get caught up in the family, what most people get caught up in on having a show, which is fame and fortune or whatever delusion.
And I thought what was really cool, Jace, was that when we met that time, which would have now been, 10 years ago, we never, your kids were teenagers and down. And so were Willie's. And so, that was a thing we really wanted to pray about because, they were going to go, they were fixing to be, nationwide and they're teenagers. How was this going to affect them? And last night, what was really cool is that Zach had planned this evening together. Of course, we had a huge Robertson meal, which was fantastic.
It was fantastic.
Jay cooked a lot of meat, and then Willie had one of his big slum gullions.
That was the best slum gullion he's done.
Oh, did you try some of that? Oh, you should have. It was incredible.
He hit it on that one.
He did.
I'm not sure
so we had a big meal.
I looked at it and then backed off.
Well, it was a slum
It had a lot in there, but it was very, very tasty.
I'll tell you, boys, something. It was a brutal thing. It would be a brutal thing to watch any unrepentant male or female. It is really a brutal thing when the unrepentant male is you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt
when I was unrepentant, and to see that.
Yeah.
Well, it got heavy last night.
At first, I said it's kind of embarrassing to think of someone's going to make a movie of your life, but once I saw some of the clips last night for the first time, I thought, man.
Yeah, it was tough.
It was.
And it was very emotional, but I was going to say that so we started it, we had some worship together, and Max and Layla, Zach's two of his children, teenage children, and then Mia,
my daughter,
led our worship. And
now, how good was that?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, that was so powerful. And
well, everybody got teary-eyed. I looked around. I mean, I was a little teary-eyed.
Because our grandchildren were singing.
Right.
Like powerfully, though. It wasn't like, don't think, they got together like a school.
I was amazed.
No, it was powerful.
It was powerful.
They
can get it.
I mean, we were worshiping, and I just thought the reason I was touched in the moment and weepy was because I thought back to 10 years ago. Here are the ones we were praying for, and please God protect them through this, whatever's going to happen with this show. And now, 10 years later, we're talking about a movie and another show, and they're leading us in worship.
Yeah,
I mean, I was like, okay, God, I got it. You're good. And so then we watched the clips, but then we spent some time in prayer, and I think because of the whole night, it was we were all emotional, and a lot of tears were shed in prayer, which I love because that's just straight out of our hearts, and Dad was too. And because obviously you have a movie made about you, and while that sounds really cool, I mean, like Dad says, it's also hard. We're reliving, some of the.
Well, right when the first clip came on, because these are memories. I mean, they were talking about interviewing the family, I guess, as a marketing deal.
Yeah.
We agreed
to promote so people will know what.
But one of the things I said right off the bat, I said, I saw this movie 45 years ago. And he's like, say that in the interview. But because, I've relived that. And I was thankful they were showing it because for me, it was a positive thing. Phil's troubles. That's why I was trying to encourage Phil. I was like,
We all were.
because it helped me see the old man, the old self, so I didn't have to go there. And I saw the transformation. Now, granted, it took a while for me to understand life is just not about not doing wrong and hating the old self. You know, the gospel of Jesus, when it came to me, I realized, oh, this is God's power doing this.
Yeah.
It's not about focusing on that. But I do think it's healthy because you need motivation. Temptation is tough, especially when you're young, and a teenager. And so a lot of times I would use Phil's troubles as motivation not to do that.
Right.
I mean, I remember thinking many, many times, and some stories I've never shared because they were difficult when I was a kid. I mean, I can't remember anything, but there's about 7 or 8 memories as a kid
Stand out.
I think about all the time. I mean, it's like I can't purge those from my head. But they were real, because when you're a kid, everything's bigger, and when you're fearful, and it's like, what's going on when the chaos ensues? You just tend to remember those moments. There's a couple of them I shared, and a couple of them are in the movie. And one of them I shared for the first time with Zach, and they actually put that in the movie.
Right.
Because I was like, when he asked me to share some of those stories, I was like, I don't really want to.
Yeah.
But if Phil's going to allow his life to be shared,
Yeah.
okay, here you go. Here's a couple. I mean, if we're going to air it out, let's air it out. So I did. But it was very moving, but
It's a brutal thing.
I think we all needed that just because we seem to be launching some shows.
Yeah, some new stuff.
And there's a lot of hoopla that happens, and we don't want to seem like we're,
Well,
it's all about us. It's not. We want to use this for God. I mean, we believe He gets all the credit for giving us a platform.
Well, Zach was kind of running the evening, and he was very emotional, and he talked about his mom because we talked a lot on here about Aunt Jan, and she's crossed over waiting, and we've talked about her role in Dad's ultimate conversion. And so, Zach's been really tied to this process because, right now he just has the memories of his mom. Well, there's her person is on the movie as a girl, and then later is an influence for you. So I think he was emotional, but I loved it because, he reminded us last night that we're still a family that's trying to impact and change the world. And so this is another medium. We've done musicals. We've done crazy stuff throughout this last 10 years, but this will be the first major motion picture, but I don't know, Jace, and we were watching it in fast clips last night, but there's just a setting of looking at us kind of in our setting is where we were. It really did look a lot like us.
Yeah, they got it right. And I mean, a lot of people be like, boy, y'all were a bunch of poor hicks. Yep. That's the way it was.
And then the stuff we didn't see it last night, Dad, but the stuff I hear that they shot of when you were a boy, which there's, quite a big section of the movie about that. It's even more poverty and,
Well, and they had Phil seemed kind of wild and crazy, and you know what? It was a
accurate.
good depiction.
Right.
It was just that's the way it was.
Yeah. So anyway, we just wanted to tell you all about it because we had mentioned it, and it was a very powerful night for us, as a family. But I think
It's a lot easier to watch that kind of stuff if it's not you that
well, your line you used on Jace,
you're dissecting.
We met them at
life.
the end of production the day before they were wrapping, and they were like, "Has it been tough, boys, making this movie?" And they're like, "Oh man!" Then they started into all that. Said, "Well, it was a lot harder to live it. I'll just tell you that."
A lot of these people guys who played me at various forms from a young life on up a teenager.
You had 3 actors play.
They're from the Britain, downtown.
But I thought they had a pretty good Southern accent.
I thought they captured it pretty well. I really thought it was good.
I asked
we only
the guy
saw
who
a
played
couple
me. I said,
clips.
"So where are you from?" He said, "London." I said, "London."
London. Never would have figured that. Let's take another break. So anyway, we'll tell you more as it comes along. Zach says probably another, 8 or 10 months of editing for the movie comes out. So we'll let you know a lot more.
But
about
even references in the Bible, I don't know how far y'all got down.
Well, I was going to tell you that we got into the first chapter, and but since you weren't here, if there was any of your take on it, I wanted you to share with it. I don't know. We talked about that idea of Jesus being superior to prophecy in the first 3 verses, and we had talked about it a little bit in the setup, and then we got into angels on the last podcast that we had. We read the rest of it.
I want to say this. I think a lot of people, or a lot of sermons I've heard, they'll go to Hebrews 1 and they'll preach sermons about angels. But you got to remember, Hebrews 1 is about Jesus.
That's right.
So
the bedrock is being laid in Hebrews 1 for about 4 verses, as all these epistles are out. Usually it comes out with stand on Jesus and the good news he brought.
Right.
I mean, I do think I've always thought that Hebrews 1, I mean, I love the first 4 verses there, because it's like, let me give you an update, world, on the timeline of this.
Yep.
I used to speak in different ways and variety of ways, but now Jesus, the Son, he is the way I'm communicating.
Right.
I mean, that you can't miss that. And it's interesting to talk about angels, and the Bible doesn't get into the details. You can look up all the verses about angels, and you can make a 10-point list on what they do and how they're used. But the point was, Jesus, even though we're going to get to that in chapter 2, was made a little lower than the angels in that he became a human,
right?
Which he really made a point about that.
Right.
I thought about that when you were talking about family last night, because he makes this reference, which we'll get into in chapter 2 in verse 11. He says, both the one who makes men holy and those who are made holy are of the same family. So Jesus is not ashamed to call them brothers. I mean, it was in light of him becoming human. But you see that inspired word, there's something awesome about being a family. You're getting that picture, even all the way back to the garden. I mean, a forever family, because that's where your mind goes to at the end, is really what it's all about. Yeah. And it was God's idea. And we talked about that last night. I mean, everybody became emotional. It was real heavy and powerful. But, somebody said something in there. Somebody said about it, being in Christ, it changes your view of death.
Yeah.
Because this is where that goes when you're a believer.
That's right.
You realize that death's not a problem.
It was Zach that mentioned that, because he talked about Bill Smith is prominent in the movie Jan,
which was emotional
Judy.
For us too. He was
Right.
a special man to all us, and you see the scene where his character, who looked eerily like him at that age,
yeah, it did,
and it just is emotional because he had an influence on us in a spiritual way.
And even Big Al, who we didn't see last night in the clip, but apparently the way Zach put it, the actor that played him was really gregarious and good, and so he kind of became when they're filming it, they loved the character of Big Al. But even him, and we told the story on the podcast that you were able to lead him to Christ before he crossed over.
Yep.
Just a few months, and so even that, I mean, all the people we were talking about that are in the film that aren't here
8
anymore.
weeks, he cut it thin.
Yeah, he got it then, but
From atheist to a son of God. But he watched for 12 years, watched me to see the difference. And when he said, how in the world did you go from one to the other like that?
Right.
How you do that?
Which, by the way, that's also the
That's
power.
An atheist, that would make sense.
That's the power of a lifestyle. That when Paul said, follow my examples, I follow the example of Christ. When you live it a certain way, it speaks volumes.
I characterized it to them when they tracked me down and said, let's go back to where we were. I'm like, nope, the one you're looking for, he's dead and gone.
Yep.
They all looked at each other like, boy, he's turned into a nut.
I think that line made it in the film. I think we didn't see it.
Might have.
I wanted to. Did y'all read the Psalms at all?
Some, yeah, we read some of them. But
did you read the Psalm 2?
No.
I read them, but I didn't mention them yesterday. But
I wanted to mention them. Was you going to say something else?
No, I got a point I want to make later, but go ahead.
So I wanted to read this. So when he says, verse 4 of chapter 1, he became as much superior to the angels, as the name he has inherited is superior to theirs.
And to your point, Jace, that's the point of this section. It's not about angels.
It's not about
It's about Jesus being more
It's
powerful.
real tempting.
Yeah.
And I know y'all
Because
discussed.
We did.
Y'all did. But you just have to remember, he's better. And you're never going to figure out exactly, what an angel looks like. I mean, there's curious verses that we all have fun with. Says
We read
when
some
you
of them.
entertain strangers, but Jesus is better. And he became lower. I mean, the humility he showed only to then, through God's power, to become over everything.
And his name, Jesus is God. His name is superior to theirs, the angels. They're never referred to as God.
No.
Ever.
Because
He's laying the groundwork to say Jesus Christ came in the flesh. He is God.
That's right.
Yeah,
All the fullness of the deity lives in bodily form.
And even though they're celestial and powerful, they're limited.
That's right.
They're not God.
Hang on. Before you read that, let's take our last break.
I just wanted to
And
read.
by the way, some of them made mistakes too. Gloomy dungeons held in gloomy.
Well, there was rebellion
Peter
in the
said,
other realm. Yeah, we know that.
I just wanted to read. When I always have read this, and I taught this, and you probably did this book, but some of these Psalms are so, you're like, oh, that's in the Bible. I mean, and so I wanted to read Psalm 2, which is a quote from Hebrews 1, 5 and 6, where it says, you are my son. Let's see if that's Psalm 2. I think verse 6 is Deuteronomy, but verse 5.
Verse 5 is Psalm 2.
You are my son, today I become your father, or again I will be his father, and he'll be my son. So that's Psalm 2, which says, why do the nations conspire and the people plot in vain? I mean, just look at our world. I mean, when was this written?
That's right.
First line. The kings of the earth take their stand, and the rulers gather together against the Lord.
I see it.
Against his anointed one. That's why I said when you read this, you're like, I've never seen something written so long ago literally just jump off the page as to what's going on in our culture and world. Let us break their chains, they say, and throw off their fetters. Verse 4 of Psalm 2, the one enthroned in heaven laughs. Talking about God. The Lord scoffs at them. Now this is David's view, of what he's doing. But then he rebukes them in his anger, and he terrifies them in his wrath, saying, I have installed my king on Zion, my holy hill. I will proclaim the decree of the Lord. He said to me, you are my son, today I have become your father. Ask of me, and I will make the nations your inheritance, the ends of the earth your possession. You will rule them with an iron scepter, and you will dash them to pieces like pottery. Therefore, you kings, be wise, be warned, you rulers of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you be destroyed in your way, for his wrath can flare up in a moment. Blessed are all who take refuge in him. But
what a text.
What's powerful to me is that you'd think, well, what did he do? It's like, so he writes a psalm about that, and you're reading this about, you're my son, today I become your father. So what did he do that made the nations respond like this? Well, Jesus came down here. He lived a perfect life. He helped people. He died and was buried and raised.
Right.
So it's like, if you're reading that if you don't know who Jesus is, you're like, oh, there's a lot of terror and anger in there.
And think about this, Jace. That statement was written 1,047 years before he got there.
Right.
Yeah.
1,500 years, 1,050 years before he actually did it.
Right.
Showed up. So the Hebrew writer just picked it up and he just
incredible.
went right on through. How would the psalmist, how would he have known all these things, Al?
Oh, it's incredible. The other one I want to mention is this one is, I did a whole lesson on this one. This one is Psalm 102, and that's quoted in verse 12 when it says, you will roll them up like a robe, like a garment, they will be changed, but you remain the same, and your years will never end. And I think 10 through 12 there. where it says, in the beginning, O Lord, verse 10, you laid the foundations of the earth. Well, if you go over to 102, now I think this is absolutely awesome. This fires me up. And the reason is because when he gets to verse 18, he says, of Psalm 102, let this be written for a future generation. Oh, I wonder who he's going to talk about. Mm-hmm. That a people not yet created may praise the Lord. I mean, you want to see the prediction 1,000, how many years ago you said, of the church being here and being a part of the greatest kingdom the earth would ever know? I mean, he's talking to us, which is very inspiring. The Lord looked down from his sanctuary on high. From heaven he viewed the earth, this is verse 19, to hear the groans of prisoners and release those condemned to death. So the name of the Lord will be declared in Zion, and his praise in Jerusalem, when the peoples and the kingdoms assemble to worship the Lord. So watch 23. In the course of my life, he broke my strength. He cut short my days, so I said. Because you got to remember the context of this whole thing. If you read the little paragraph below 102, it says, a prayer of an afflicted man when he is faint and pours out his lament before the Lord, which that's why I was saying last night, that came up about us. I mean, Phil, you're 76, and I mean, we're all getting older.
Right.
So he tells this beautiful, I mean, it's beautiful, but would be depressing without Jesus.
Yeah.
And some of before I read that 23, I did like the verse 5 when it says, because of my loud groaning, I'm reduced to skin and bones. I'm like a desert owl, like an owl among the ruins. He was talking about just looking at his body.
Yeah.
I pictured this desert, and there's an owl. I mean, that's all that's left.
And there's nothing to eat, so
there's nothing to eat. And so then he starts talking about, I'll eat ashes as my food and mingle my drink with tears because of your great wrath. So he compares that to being without God, trying to live a life, without God and experiencing the end time judgments just from a life without any hope. And then verse 11, he's like, my days are like evening shadow, I wither away like grass. So that's the context. So then when he gets back to 24, so I said, do not take me away, oh my God, in the midst of my days. Your years go on through all generations. And then here's our quote from Hebrews. In the beginning, you laid the foundations of the earth, and the heavens are the work of your hands. They will perish, but you will remain. They will all wear out like a garment. Like clothing, you will change them, and they will be destroyed.
I hope the new Green Deal, I hope their listeners are listening to that.
yeah.
It's pertinent. Y'all need to, you save the planet crowd, you better look.
But here's the key, verse 27, but you remain the same, and your years will never end. The children of your servants will live in your presence. Their descendants will be established before you. So I'm saying you get a bigger picture when you read Hebrews. And sure, he was talking to these, those coming out of that Jewish system, but that's a picture for everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, he's saying, look, we all struggle with getting old and the fear of death, and there's nothing you can do to change it.
Right.
And he's like, you know why God is better through Jesus? You know why Jesus is a better way? And this is the picture you're getting. Of course, you see how he's describing really the death of Jesus for our sins and the resurrection for our frailties when it comes to trying to overcome death. But sandwiched in between that is this group of people, which is the church, that are a part of this, which is your family. That's what he's given you this vision of. And not only that, to Phil's point, he gave that vision through a guy making music with a harp over 1,000 years ago, and then quoted here.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about that same text, Jace, on the podcast yesterday, because I was talking about my sermon, and I mentioned in my sermon Sunday about Lumé, which was he was a godly guy, had a position in the church, but was also a great scientist. This is like 100 years ago. He posited the theory on top of Einstein's that the universe began at a singularity and is expanding, which is now proven to be true. because of the Hubble telescope and all that. But that's what this verse says when he talks about laying out like a garment and expanding. So how did the psalmist 1,000 years ago, before Lumet ever came along and had an observation, say the same thing that is true? Because God made it.
Boy.
Right? I mean, that's pretty powerful. So that's what we were into that yesterday.
I'm telling you.
Well, I know we're out of time. Are we out of time?
We are out of time.
But I want to make a connection, because this is a secondary thought, between Psalm 102 and this Romans 8, talking about the whole
Yeah,
creation.
get that on your next
Yeah, let's
section.
do that on the overtime.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to get
All right,
into.
that sounds perfect. All right, remember, blazetv.com/unashamed is how you get the overtime segment, and that's where we're headed.
Thanks for listening to the Unashamed podcast. Help us out by rating us on iTunes. And don't miss an episode by subscribing on YouTube, and be sure to click that little bell to get notified about new episodes. And for even more content that you won't get anywhere else, subscribe to Blaze TV at blazetv.com/unashamed.